Yeah,
let's get to some actual football talk, huh?
So we're going to get into kind of some of the interesting results of week 1 of the NFL season and play the Contenders game or the, or how should we say it? Contenders and Pretenders. Who really is that team, or is it, maybe who they played, all that stuff.
We are who we thought they were.
Yes, exactly.
They are who we thought they were. I'm sorry.
Great quote from Flanny Walker, by the way, after that Browns game, saying that, again, shout out to Dennis Green, rest in peace. But, okay, so we're going to start with, this is kind of a team we already mentioned, the Baltimore Ravens.
Ooh,
the
59 points.
Yeah, Baltimore Ravens blew out the Miami Hurricanes, as I'm going to call them, until they actually show that they're an NFL team.
That's a little disrespect right there, but okay.
Yeah, they lost by 49. They were down by like 39 at halftime or something like that.
You do you, boo-boo.
Yeah. But so the Baltimore Ravens won 59-10. Lamar Jackson with probably the best stats out of any player in the NFL on Sunday. Jared, do we think they are pretenders or contenders? Was it the Dolphins defense that allowed this to happen, or is the Ravens offense really that good?
They're contenders, in my opinion. And the Ravens all offseason were saying, listen, we are going to cut back on Lamar Jackson in the amount of times that we let him run the football and be more of an athlete. Lamar Jackson himself said that he wanted to be more of a pocket passer. And yes, albeit going up against a bad defense, but listen, you still have to execute your plays, and you still have to put, the ball in the right spots for your playmaking receivers to make plays, which Lamar Jackson did that perfectly. So he only ran the ball 3 times, right? I think there was not one game last year that Lamar Jackson played where he only ran 3 times. So I think they tried to prove that, hey, he can be a pocket passer, and he can not only beat you with his legs, but he can beat you with his arms. And you put together that great Baltimore Ravens defense. I think they're a top 5 defense in the league. You have Earl Thomas there back in the secondary. They got a little banged up. Jimmy Smith is going to be out for a few weeks. But really, altogether, that Baltimore Ravens defense is legit. So the fact that that defense is going to be solid and they're not going to give up a lot of points per game, I think that only gives more confidence to Lamar Jackson. And with that division kind of wide open, I think it's the Ravens for the taking.
Yeah, I think you could definitely call them contenders for the AFC North for sure title. And because after we saw the Browns and the Steelers and the Bengals just overall roster, I think you look at it and the Ravens are probably the clear-cut top team. I'm going to call them pretenders in the way in that their offense is not going to perform like this. Normal
they're
basis.
not going to average 59 points a game for the rest of the
I'm not
season.
saying even. I'm just saying I think they'll go back. They play my Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals defense is much better than Miami. I watched them play Detroit. They only made a couple defensive mistakes that led to touchdowns. But other than that, the Cardinals defense looked pretty solid. Not great, but solid for the talent that they have on that defense. So the Ravens will have a tougher test. In both the offensive scheme and the defensive scheme of the Arizona Cardinals, not the worst the worst first 2 matchups for the Ravens, but I do think that they are not, like, Lamar Jackson is not going to be having these type of games. There will be teams that will be able to stop him, and they will still lose some games this season, and they will not be the Chiefs of last year and be scoring 30, 40 points.
No, they will not. The one thing I will say, this is an interesting matchup. You have Terrell Suggs, who is now an Arizona Cardinal, going back to his former team in the Baltimore Ravens, where he won a Super Bowl and played his entire career up until this year. So you better bet that he's going to be motivated. And he's going to want to come out and sack Lamar Jackson and prove that, hey, I've still got some game. So I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic to watch going forward into that game.
No, I agree. And obviously I will be watching personally that game. So that will be exciting to play. And it will be interesting to see what the Cardinals come up as far as the scheme to stop Lamar Jackson and Hollywood Brown, who had a great game.
Wow, 2 touchdowns.
No, that's what I'm saying. So it's, they now have even more weapons than we thought. I'm just going to pump the brakes a little bit and say I don't think they're Super Bowl contenders yet. They keep doing this over a couple weeks. I'll change my mind about that for sure. Okay, the next team is going to be one of the Monday Night Football teams, and that is the Raiders. The Oakland Raiders pull out a big win. We've been talking about them a lot on this podcast for negative reasons already. They obviously had all the stuff go down with Antonio Brown getting released and not being a team player and stuff like that. They come out on Monday Night Football and beat the Broncos pretty handily. I know the score was only an 8-point victory, but it seemed like the Raiders were in control of that whole game. Jared, do we think the Raiders are contenders or pretenders?
I'm not going to sit here and say that the Raiders are pretenders yet. I'm pleasantly surprised by what the Raiders, what they showed on offense and on defense against the Broncos. Listen, it's a division matchup, so even though from year to year, players change teams and there's going to be different schemes and everything going on. The Broncos have a new head coach, have a new defensive system, but still, you're a little more familiar with a division opponent as opposed to playing someone outside of your division. So I think that came into play with both of these teams, especially with the Raiders, and getting somewhat of a leg up and getting ready for the Broncos. Listen, I think this was really about the Broncos just not showing up, right? The Broncos had a dropped touchdown in the second half. And listen, you talk about Von Miller and Bradley Chubb on the defensive ends for the Broncos, two of arguably the best duo at defensive end, outside linebacker, and they did not touch Derek Carr. Derek Carr's jersey at the end of the game was clean and fresh, like it just came out of the
and
dryer.
there's baseball dirt on that field, too. That's impressive.
So the fact that the Broncos defense was not able to even pressure Derek Carr, and Derek Carr was basically able to stand in that pocket and look over and throw to whoever he wanted to, I think played a huge factor in why the Raiders won. So, listen, it was a great win for the Raiders, and I'm happy that they won. It was the last Monday Night Football game in Oakland, because obviously next year the Raiders will be moving to Vegas. So those Oakland fans got a nice treat on Monday Night Football. But I think that this game was really more about the mistakes that the Broncos made on offense and the fact that they were not able to get pressure on Derek Carr from the defensive side of the ball.
I'm going to call them pretenders only because of their schedule coming up. I believe, let's see how many games this is. This is 8 games. Their next 8 games, I just want to tell you, are the Chiefs, the Vikings, Colts, Bears, Packers, Texans, Lions, and Chargers. How many games do we realistically think that they are going to win of those? I know it's great that you get the wins that you have to, right? But I mean, looking at that, I only see like the chance for even like 3 wins out of those teams.
And they did get banged up in the secondary. Garyon Conley, who went out with that bad neck injury, he said he's going to be okay, which is, thankfully. But we're not sure if he's going to be playing this week. They might keep him out for precautionary reasons. Their rookie safety, Jonathan Abram, he has a shoulder injury, potentially out for the year. Yeah. So they did get banged up on defense a little bit. And obviously in the NFL, where a lot of teams are spreading the ball out and passing a lot more, that is not a good sign for them. So you kind of pair that with the next schedule, a few games coming up for the Raiders, and things aren't necessarily looking good. The one thing I will say about this Raiders team is they look very physical. Their rookie running back was a beast. And I think that they're going to come out and they're going to be physical. They're going to be a team that's not going to quit, right? I don't know if they're necessarily going to have the talent to go up and really compete against some of these other teams that they're playing, but they're not going to be the Dolphins who are just going to lay down and give up. They're going to put up a fight, and that's what John Gruden's teams always do. So, that's kind of more of a respect thing than anything else. But I think this team will compete until the end, and that's something that I like about that. That's something that we saw in this game, was them competing for the full 60 minutes of this game.
Yeah, I just think their roster overall, it's very, even with AB going into this stretch of games, I wouldn't have thought that they would win most of, you know what I'm saying? And wide receivers, we talked about this a lot. With wide receivers, they can make a difference, but they don't make the difference usually. And so this roster already is kind of, it's makeshift. There's a lot of unknown guys. There's a lot of, I don't want to say untalented guys, but guys that aren't superstars on this roster.
Well, listen, they're very young, right? You have Darren Waller, who's a tight end, and he's a
great story,
a freak of nature as an athlete. I mean, you look at him, you're like, oh my gosh, but he's unproven. You have Hunter Renfrow, who's the rookie out of Clemson, who was a good receiver at Clemson. He's a great slot receiver. Most people were comparing him to Wes Welker or Julian Edelman, but he's still unproven. And then you've got Tyrell Williams, who came over from the Chargers, and he is now your number 1 receiver. And we saw what he did, kind of extending the defense. He had a couple big plays, but will he be able to consistently do that? Because he's really the only deep threat that the Raiders have. So you take Tyrell Williams away, and everything is going to be dink and dunk. They're not really going to have much down the field to stretch a defense. So I think head coach John Gruden, they're going to have to come up with different schemes and interesting ways to spread the ball around. Because if I'm a defense and I'm looking at this offense right now that's currently constructed by the Raiders, I'm saying you guys only have one deep threat. I'm going to be lining up man-to-man, bump and run coverage, and I'm going to force Derek Carr. I'm going to put 8 men in the box to stop the run, and I'm going to force Derek Carr to throw it deep, because you take one of their deep threats away, and that's all they got.
No, 100%. That's what I'm saying. It's. I don't want to be disrespectful with this, but it's kind of like this offense is made up of the Island of Mischief toys. Like it's a Chargers third receiver, running back that was homeless, that was a backup at Alabama, tight end that was in rehab 2 years ago. No, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying this is looking at this roster. If you would have said this is who the Raiders have on their team 2 years ago, you'd be like, "What are you talking? Like, what? Who are these guys?" You know what I'm saying? So, and then obviously you got Derek Carr in the mix, who's a solid quarterback, hasn't proven to be that guy yet, even though he was kind of paid to be that guy. But I just think we'll see what happens. They could shock both of us and go and beat the Chiefs next week at home and. I'm just saying.
Pump the brakes on that.
The Colts are beatable. The Texans are beatable if you can get pressure on Deshaun Watson. Obviously, the Lions are beatable. Chargers, that's going to be tough. And the Packers are going to play Aaron Rodgers, and that's with secondary getting beat up, that doesn't look good. So, just looking at the next couple games, we don't expect the Raiders to win much, but maybe they do. I'm saying, looking at the roster, I'm not going to call them contenders just based on the roster and based on their schedule.
Quickly, before we move on, put some damn respect on Josh Jacobs' name. Yes,
he was on my fantasy team. He almost single-handedly won my game.
Clemson's head coach Dabo Swinney was interviewed and asked about Josh Jacobs and said that he is the best running back that he has ever faced as a coach. So that's a lot right there. Josh Jacobs is a physical bruiser. He can run between the tackles. He can run outside. We saw he had 2 touchdowns. One was leaping over the offense to get into the end zone. Wow. That dude is a straight beast, and I think he's going to be the new Marshawn Lynch of this offense, where he's going to have to carry the load and carry the ball 25 to 30 times a game. So he better be getting massages and ice baths and all that, because throughout this season, 16-game season, he will be carrying the load for this team.
Relatively... the load he carried in college, I mentioned this a lot on Monday Night Football, because he was in a kind of 3 running back committee at Alabama.
Right, he's fresh.
He's relatively fresh and didn't play in the preseason that much either. So, yeah, for the Raiders, use Josh Jacobs as much as you can, because like you said, with the lack of receiving threats, running the ball does help, and all that stuff.
All right, who's our next team?
We're going to go with, Jared, I think you know this team pretty well. We're going to go with the Dallas Cowboys.
Hey now.
Are they contenders or pretenders after a big, pretty dominant win, 35-17 over the New York Giants? Contenders or pretenders? Your Cowboys.
Dallas, they're contenders, and I, you can call me a homer. You can say that. I've been saying this throughout all of offseason. There are a lot of people around the league who watch football who think that the Cowboys are contenders as well. They came out and listen. They did what they had to do against the Giants. Everyone knows that the Giants were depleted, not only at the receiver position, but their defense was a new defense. They had a lot of new faces out there, a lot of young faces. And listen, when you have a team that's kind of on the ropes like that and that is very young, you're supposed to take advantage of that, right? The Patriots do it all the time. And I think the Cowboys, in recent years, they've been able to win the games that they were supposed to, but they were either squeaking by or they just didn't look as solid. Even though it was week 1 and they did have a lot of mistakes, they let Saquon Barkley rush for over 120 yards, but that's Saquon Barkley. I think this Cowboys team came out improved through the air, and not just with Ezekiel Elliott, that they could be multi-dimensional. And as a whole, offensively, defensively, and special teams, this team is going to be a force to be reckoned with once they kind of get into a groove and into a rhythm. To be honest, I think the Philadelphia Eagles within that division are the only other team that is going to challenge the Cowboys for that division. And I fully expect the Cowboys to, not only make a run for the playoffs, but go deep into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I called the Cowboys contenders before the season, and all they did was just prove exactly that. Now, I am interested. Their first 3 games, obviously they played Giants week 1, at Redskins, and then versus the Dolphins.
Right.
4th game is at the Saints.
Right.
So that's the game I'm really going to be looking at. Because when you have these really, really good teams and these stacked rosters and stuff like that, you always want to look at that first big game. And so I think, we're going to see the Cowboys. We'll go 3-0 to start the season.
Listen, the Redskins play them very tough, and they have a good defense.
The Cowboys, like I said, they're contenders.
The Cowboys should win that game.
Exactly.
But that's not going to be a cakewalk like the Dolphins probably will be, and not like this Giants game was.
No, exactly. So I just think that once you have that first big game, especially with the way people have talked about the Cowboys in the past and how the Cowboys haven't won the big games in the past, I think starting to win those regular season ones will help turn it around in the playoffs.
Listen, I think a lot of confidence is going to come in that game against the Saints because last year when the Saints came to Dallas completely shut them out, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think you have a lot of the same defenders who were on that team last year, so they had a chance to go up against Drew Brees and see what that offensive scheme can do. They still have Sean Payton, and they're still running the same scheme. So I think that's going to be a huge boost for this Cowboys defense going into that game in a hostile environment in New Orleans, knowing that they've gone up against this guy last year and they are going to kind of know what to expect. I think it's one thing when you're playing against Drew Brees, who can carve you up in a heartbeat if you have never faced him before or you're unfamiliar with what he's doing. But the fact that the Cowboys had a good game against them last year, I think, that's just some more tools, some more recruiting tools that they can use to go up against that team. So I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here. The Cowboys still have to go to Washington in week 2 and beat a division opponent. And I think Washington is going to be really upset and pissed because they should have beat Philadelphia week 1, right? They were up 17-0 and they let Philadelphia come back. So the Redskins are going to be upset. They did lose Darius Geis, who they're uncertain of how long he's going to be out, but he's more than likely not going to be playing. Adrian Peterson, who is a healthy scratch, is reportedly very upset that he was a healthy scratch. And there's a lot of teammates in that Redskins locker room that are upset that he was not active either. So I think he's going to come out with wanting something to prove. And I think this Redskins team is going to be, saying, hey, we should have won week 1. We need to come out and prove that we are a better team. So this will be no cakewalk for the Cowboys. It'll be a hostile environment. Like I said, a rivalry game. You never know.
Yeah, no, exactly. And not even going to the Redskins, just talking about that Peterson thing. Before the game, everyone hated that decision. And then the fact that your starting running back gets hurt and then you don't have Adrian Peterson to fill in there.
Right.
That's just a bad decision by Jay Gruden. So let's you don't need that extra special teamer, right? You don't need that extra defensive lineman. You need to score points, and so I thought that was a stupid idea. I mean, all the Redskins really had to do was just stop Deshaun Jackson, right, in that game.
Listen, Deshaun Jackson, that's all he does. He runs
literally all he does.
Posts and deep routes, and he was able to get past the Redskins defense for 2 long touchdowns. Exactly. Unbelievable.
Yeah, no,
unbelievable.
I know they've lost to the defenders in the secondary too, but it's still
no excuse.
Still disappointing.
Nick, who's our next team?
Okay, so we do have a little bit extra time, and I know the last teams we're not going to talk about too much. So I do want to add one team to this: pretenders and contenders. The Minnesota Vikings.
Wow.
Because they blew out the Atlanta Falcons in what was a surprising game for me. I even put a bet on the Falcons to win that game. And so that blowout came to a complete shock to me. I'm sure you didn't expect the Vikings to win by that much either. But are they contenders or pretenders? Was this just a one-off game? Did the Vikings play well at home?
Now listen, in our NFL prediction show that we did a few weeks ago, I had the Chicago Bears as the only team coming out of the NFC North. So that means the Green Bay Packers, the Detroit Lions, and the Minnesota Vikings were going to be missing the playoffs altogether. The Minnesota Vikings came out and said, hey, against a conference opponent, not a division opponent, but the conference opponent in the Falcons, who we all thought the Falcons were going to be very good with Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. And the Vikings came out and kicked them in the mouth, right?
Yeah.
I've been very skeptical of Kirk Cousins and this entire offense. But when you have a healthy Dalvin Cook and the fact that you cannot just sit back and expect Kirk Cousins to throw the ball 50 times, when he has that security blanket in Dalvin Cook, this offense can be a huge threat. You have Adam Thielen, you have Stephon Diggs. I mean, that's a pretty solid core right there to go along with a great Minnesota Vikings defense led by head coach Mike Zimmer. I have to give this team a lot of credit. I was not expecting that at all. Some people are going to say, oh, the Falcons just didn't show up and didn't play well. That may be the case, but I think you also have to give credit where credit is due. And the Vikings showed up for this game and showed that they are going to be contenders. So the Minnesota Vikings, as of today, are contenders. We will see what they do in week 2.
Yeah, I kind of have to say it because you look at this is a lot like the Ravens one where you look at the Bears absolutely underperformed in the first game of the season. The Packers didn't look very good, and the Lions completely blew their game against my Arizona Cardinals. I mean, they were up by 18 at one point in the fourth quarter. So I just think you look at the Vikings after week one, they clearly look like the best team. We know that defense is stout. Can Kirk Cousins make that extra jump? I don't know, but anytime you have a defense like the Vikings do and you can score that many points and look that impressive, I have to call them contenders. Again, a lot like the Cowboys, though. Let's see them, in their first real big game.
The one thing that I want to say about all these predictions that we just made, this is all week one, right? So this is it's a brand new season. You've got new coaches everywhere, new players. And listen, are the Dolphins going to look as bad as they did against the Ravens the rest of the season? Probably not. They will probably improve and get a little better. Are the Ravens going to look as great as they did in week one? Probably not. They will probably regress a little bit. Lamar Jackson is not going to throw 5 touchdown passes every single game. So everything that we are saying today, take with a little grain of salt.
Of course,
because teams are still working out the kinks. It's really not until week 3, week 4 when you start to see teams really gel. And let's remember this as well. This preseason, there were a lot of starters that did not play. So just from a stamina factor, right, and getting kind of their legs underneath them, it takes a few weeks to really get into football shape. There is a huge difference between being in actual shape and being in football shape. So it takes a few weeks for guys to get
never
going.
Affect Ezekiel Elliott though.
I mean, Zeke's just a beast. He's just a freak.
Right?
Listen,
he went there and he scored a touchdown and he just seems to never win.
Well, listen, I think
everybody else.
He also only had 13 carries. The Cowboys were monitoring, him the entire way, knowing, listen, you didn't come, you weren't practicing, you weren't really in pads at all. So I think that was smart by them to kind of ease him back in and not just say, oh, here's 30 carries, go lead the team. So, but I just want to say, it takes a few weeks for these guys to really get into a rhythm offensively and defensively and just from an individual standpoint. So, don't overreact, even though this is Wednesday. Everyone likes to say the overreaction Monday, or let's all play the Monday morning quarterback. Let's all pump the brakes and let's see what these teams do in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And then I think we're going to have a much greater understanding of who are the contenders and who are the pretenders.
Interesting thing about this Vikings game, too, Kirk Cousins 8 for 10 for 98 yards, and they still win 20-12.
Efficient. If you don't need to throw the ball 30 or 40 times, you don't need to.
100%. And by the way, how good does Dalvin Cook look? Oh my goodness.
Our Alex Silva, one of our friends on the show, he's a huge Dalvin Cook fan. He's been talking him up ever since he came out of Florida State.
Yeah.
So Dalvin Cook, finally, if he can stay healthy, that is going to be a huge asset.
Because then you take so much pressure off Kirk Cousins.
Exactly.
And
if Kirk Cousins is throwing the ball 30, 40 times a game, that is more than likely a loss. I'm just telling you right now.
Okay, so this last one, we're not going to do contenders and pretenders, but I don't think this team we expected to be contenders, and I don't think even after this result you can say contenders and pretenders, but more about impressive. Let's play impressive or not. Arizona Cardinals coming back from 18 in the fourth quarter to end up tying the Detroit Lions. If you didn't see the highlights, in overtime, the Cardinals dropped a wide open interception in what would have been like a 40-yard field goal to end overtime, potentially win it.
Mm-hmm.
So Cardinals, literally a catch away from winning this game as well after being down 18 in the fourth quarter. Jared, the unbiased Cardinals fan, obviously. Mm-hmm. What was this impressive or not?
No, not at all. I think the Cardinals look like crap. I'm sorry. Listen, the Cardinals, they played well later on in the game because they had to throw the ball and they had to go up tempo. I think the Cardinals, unfortunately, need to do that for the entire game.
Yeah.
When they're playing up tempo, when they're not necessarily huddling, when they can get a defense on its heels, I think that's when Kyler Murray and this entire offense will excel, because that's when Kyler Murray can go 1 read, 2 read, it's not there, pull it down and run, right? When a defense has time to set, make additional calls and adjustments, and they can kind of see what's coming, this Cardinals defense is gonna look horrible. So the first half they put up 3 points, and then going into the fourth quarter, the Cardinals had 6 points. It wasn't until they started to have some urgency within themselves that I think they actually started to play well. So no, I have zero confidence, I'm sorry, in this Cardinals team, because I think they came out a little lackluster. the Lions, they're not a good team. I picked the Lions to be dead last in their division, and the Lions, I think, were the ones that gave this game away. The Lions are the ones that had the lead, and they should have never let the Cardinals come back. So I think this was more about the Lions giving it up than the Cardinals coming back. It was great that the Cardinals came back and they showed fight. Good for them. But why not start out like that, right? Why not start out with a little more urgency? Start out with some up-tempo stuff. I don't know why. I feel like the New England Patriots are really one of the only teams in the NFL that does that just sudden urgency of they get a first down, right, and you see them kind of jogging up to the line, and then all of a sudden Tom Brady looks to the sideline and the entire team sprints up to the line, and they get up and they snap the ball and go to another play before the defense is even set. Why other teams, especially the Cardinals, who it seems like with Cliff Kingsbury offense wants to be up tempo, why they don't do that and kind of shock defenses a little bit more and get defenses off their rhythm. I think that is how the Cardinals will be successful.
Yeah, Cliff Kingsbury said that he was a little too cute in the first half, and that he was kind of, with the way that that whole scheme is and how most NFL players haven't dealt with a scheme like that, he said that he put too much on everybody's plate, and that's why they were losing like 10 yards per play, first couple drives and all that stuff. I'm not going to say it was impressive either, because they didn't win. And I think it would have been impressive, let's say, if they came back and won by 2 touchdowns, right? The things that were interesting to me as a fan of the team that did watch the entire game was that they played so bad. The fact that they scored 27 points and actually came back was impressive to me. And the other thing is, Kyler Murray played awful in the first half. I mean, making some of the worst decisions I've seen an NFL quarterback make. There was an interception they threw that was worse than high school kids I've seen in the last couple of years. There was times where he would, instead of throwing the ball away, just get sacked for like 7 yards. And I know, I get it. In college, you usually get around defenders.
Yeah, not in the NFL.
A little tougher, and he did later in the game. But what impressed me was that after all that, and even after 3 horrendous quarters, he still came back, and some of the throws, I urge you to go watch a video I retweeted of all the passes in the comeback that Kyler Murray made. Most of them are right on the money. I made a joke saying all of these passes were better than anything Mitch Trubisky did. I'm telling you, man, if this was Kyler Murray's worst game, the NFL needs to watch out in the next couple of years. I'm not saying the Cardinals are contenders this year. I will not say that. That's ridiculous, and it would make me look like an idiot on this podcast. But I'm telling you, next coming years, if they can get this scheme rolling and they can build that defense, the Cardinals are going to be a scary team if this was Kyler Murray's, in fact, worst game of his career.
We'll see. And the same thing that I've been saying about pumping the brakes about all these great teams, and hey, listen, it's only week 1. We'll see if they can, be consistent with playing that well.
Tough matchup against Ravens. Yeah.
The same thing with all these teams that kind of didn't look so good. The Browns, the Dolphins, the Cardinals, who I didn't think looked good at all. There's obviously a lot of room to improve, so we will see if they can figure out ways to improve and come out and do different schemes. They have a tough matchup against the Ravens in Baltimore, and I'm looking forward to seeing if these teams can say, okay, we're going to shrug that off, we're going to change, a little bit of our schemes, and we'll see if we can come back and improve. If they don't improve, that's when you're just going to say, okay, these are just bad teams.
Yeah,
so we will see with a rookie head coach, rookie quarterback, going into a hostile environment against one of the best defenses in the league. We'll see what schemes they come up with. And if they can improve and start better, right? It's always people say it's not how you start, it's how you finish. In this instance, this really is about how you start, because you are not going to come back against the Ravens like you did against the Lions. I'm sorry. You get down double-digit points against the Ravens, and it's basically going to be a wrap. So you have to start well in order to finish well if you're the Cardinals.
I'll say this, though. Unlike 15 other teams in the NFL, Cardinals are undefeated. So I'm just going to say that. There's a lot of teams that are 0-1 after week 1, and the Cardinals found a way to not lose that game, which is,
Gotta find the silver lining somewhere.
Undefeated.
And that is the
just
Cardinals
like the Cowboys.
There we go. That is how we are going to end this podcast. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate all the comments. A lot of NFL news, and obviously a lot of things that were off the field. But hopefully next week, week 2, we can get back to talking about strictly football on the field for an entire podcast. So stay tuned. We will have updates. This will be on Facebook. We will be putting it on Instagram and Twitter as well, and YouTube. So be on the lookout for those. But for today, I'm Jared Smith.
I'm Nenad.
And this has been the Cover 2 podcast. We'll see you next week.